There is a whole group of people who grew up in a very unique time. They remember using rotary phones, but they also remember when the first iPhone was launched. Because of this, psychologists sometimes struggle to decide where this group really belongs. If you were born between 1976 and 1985, you are technically at the end of Generation X, but at the same time, you are not really a millennial either, even though many people try to place you in that category. Around 2014, researchers started calling this group Xennials. Some sociologists even describe them as a micro-generation because the time window is very small. But the events that happened during those years created a very interesting experience that is worth understanding. Let's start with childhood. If you are part of this group, your early life happened in an analog world. Boredom was normal. You had to sit with it. You had to remember phone numbers because phones did not store them for you. And if you missed your favorite TV show, that was it. There was no replay or streaming. The episode was simply gone. But then, something big happened. Right when many of you were becoming adults, the entire world suddenly became digital. The change did not happen slowly. It happened very fast. Most generations grow up completely inside one type of technology, but Xennials experienced both worlds during the years when they were still discovering who they were. Your teen years looked completely different from your 20s. Think about your teen life for a moment. You probably passed handwritten notes in class. Conversations disappeared after they ended because nothing was recorded. When you made plans with friends, you could not send a quick message saying, "I'm late." You simply showed up and hoped your friends were there. That kind of life required a different level of trust and commitment. But then, everything changed. In your 20s, suddenly everyone had cell phones. Social media appeared. First Friendster, then MySpace, and later Facebook. Before social media, people usually had only a few ways to contact someone. Maybe their home phone, their workplace number, or you could just visit their house. Now there are dozens of apps and messaging platforms, and you simply learned how to use them. From a psychological point of view, this timing is very interesting. Brain research shows that a part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex continues developing until around the age of 25. This area helps us adapt to new situations and learn complex skills. Studies published in Nature Neuroscience show that this part of the brain keeps maturing well into our 20s. That means Xennials were still in a very flexible learning stage when technology completely changed. You were young enough to adapt easily to new technology, but old enough to remember life before it existed. This created a rare kind of balance. Many people from Generation X sometimes feel skeptical about new technology because they were already adults when it appeared. On the other hand, younger millennials often have no real memory of life without the internet. But Xennials experienced both worlds. You can easily have a face-to-face conversation without checking your phone every few seconds. At the same time, you are not afraid to learn new technology or software. You also remember something many younger people never experienced, being completely unreachable for hours. Another interesting difference appears in the way this group thinks about privacy. When you were growing up, embarrassing moments simply faded away with time. They were not permanently stored online. That awkward haircut in 7th grade, that breakup, or that wild party night, there was usually no photo evidence. They only existed as stories people told. Because of that, your memories could slowly change and evolve. Human memory is naturally flexible. Our brains edit the past, keeping what matters and letting the rest disappear. But today, almost everything is documented and searchable forever. And researchers are still trying to understand how this affects memory and identity. However, there is another important part of the Xennial experience. Many people from this group entered the workforce around the time of the 2008 financial crisis. That meant many of them faced serious economic instability right when they were trying to start their careers. Research shows that financial hardship during this stage of life can have long-lasting psychological effects. People who experience job loss or financial stress during their early career often carry that fear with them for years. It changes the way they think about money, security, and risk. So this generation experienced two powerful forces at the same time. On one side, they learned how to adapt quickly to massive technological change. On the other side, they experienced economic uncertainty just when they were trying to build stability. This combination created a unique mindset. You know how to adapt when things change, because you have already done it. But at the same time, there may always be a quiet thought in the back of your mind asking, what if everything falls apart again? Interestingly, people rarely talk about this group. Most conversations about generations focus on Gen X and Millennials, as if everyone born between the late 1960s and the late 1990s had the same experience. But the exact years you were born in can shape your life in powerful ways. Xennials often carry a strange mix of traits. You grew up with the independence of Gen X. Your parents probably did not always know where you were. You spent time outside, solved problems on your own, and learned how to deal with boredom. But you also entered adulthood when the internet was new and exciting, when people believed technology would connect the world and solve many problems. Because of this, Xennials often feel comfortable holding two opposite ideas at the same time. You can be independent, but also cooperative. You can be skeptical, yet still hopeful. You understand both the analog and digital worlds. You remember what life was like before, and you also understand the world after. That means you can see both sides. You can appreciate modern technology and convenience, but you also understand what we may have lost along the way. For example, it is harder today to truly be alone with your thoughts. Patience is disappearing because everything happens instantly. And it is harder to stay fully present when something is always competing for our attention. But at the same time, we gained incredible access to information, connection, and opportunities that previous generations could never imagine. If you are a Xennial, you might sometimes feel like you do not fully belong anywhere. Too young for one group, too old for another. But that's actually the defining part of your experience. You lived through one of the biggest transitions in modern history, the shift from an analog world to a digital one. And learning how to adapt during that transition may be one of the most valuable lessons anyone can have. Not because this generation is better than others, but because it experienced a moment in history that forced people to learn something important: how to adapt to change without losing who you are.